The room was silent, except for the beeping of the hospital machines. I lay broken, bleeding, mourning the baby I'd never hold. Then my mother-in-law leaned in and said almost casually, "Good riddance." The words hung in the air. Something inside me broke, and it wasn't just grief. That was the moment I realized. This story wasn't about loss. It was about justice. Hey everyone, I'm Nichole, and this is the story of how the cruelest moment of my life became the moment I finally found my strength. Like and subscribe if you love stories of justice served cold. Comment where you're watching from. Your support means everything. But let me take you back 3 years because the woman who said those words, I thought she would be my second mother. But I was about to learn just how wrong I could be. I grew up an only child with parents who lived across the country. When Eric proposed, I was over the moon. Not just because I was marrying my soulmate, but because I was finally getting the big family I'd always dreamed of. Eric painted this picture of Sunday dinners and holiday traditions, of Patricia teaching me her famous lasagna recipe and sharing mother-daughter shopping trips. I imagined her helping me pick out baby clothes someday, being the grandmother who spoiled our kids rotten. I'd close my eyes and picture it perfectly, Patricia and me in matching aprons, laughing as flour dusted our hands while we baked cookies for her future grandchildren. I imagined her being the first person I'd call with pregnancy news, the one who'd cry happy tears and immediately start planning baby showers. In my naive heart, she wasn't just going to be my mother-in-law, she was going to be the mother I'd always wished lived closer. How naive I was. The manipulation started immediately, disguised as love. Patricia had a key to our place and used it freely, reorganizing my kitchen, replacing my dish towels with ones that matched better, rearranging furniture to make better use of the space. When I'd come home to find her folding our laundry, I actually called Eric excitedly, "Your mom surprised us with groceries and cleaned the whole place." Every major decision became hers to influence. Job offers, apartment hunting, even which car to buy, Eric would casually say, "Let me just run this by mom first." I found it sweet at first. Family input, right? I was so desperate for a mother figure that I twisted every boundary violation into an act of care. The wedding planning should have been my wake-up call. I'd found this beautiful garden venue after weeks of research. Eric loved it, said it was perfect. Then he talked to his mother. The next day, "I've been thinking about the venue. Maybe something more traditional would be better. More practical." He genuinely believed he'd reached this conclusion himself. But it was the constant comparisons that slowly poisoned everything. Sarah, Eric's college ex who'd apparently been perfect in every way, I wasn't. My cooking had too much salt, not like how Sarah makes it. My career in marketing was so unstable. Sarah was a teacher, much more practical. Even how I folded towels was wrong. "They'll get wrinkled that way, Sarah had such neat hands." Eric defended her every time. "She doesn't mean it that way. That's just how she shows she cares." The breaking point came when I realized that instead of talking to me, his wife, about our problems, Eric would call his mother for advice on how to handle me. Like I was a difficult appliance that came with a manual only she could read. Then we got pregnant. I was 6 weeks along, wanted to wait until 12 weeks to tell people. But Eric had to tell someone, and according to him, mom doesn't count as telling people. So Patricia knew about my pregnancy before I was ready. She knew before my own sister. Before my best friends. Before I'd even fully processed it myself. That should have been my private joy. Instead, it became another thing she controlled. And that control was about to turn deadly. At 8 weeks, I started bleeding. The cramping hit at work like a sledgehammer to my stomach. I barely made it to the bathroom before my legs gave out. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth as I called Eric, voice barely a whisper. "Something's wrong." The emergency room felt like purgatory. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow. The smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils, mixed with something else. That hospital smell of fear and grief trying to mask human suffering. Somewhere down the hall in maternity, I could hear babies crying. New life entering the world while mine was slipping away. Eric held my hand while we waited for ultrasound results, but his other hand was already reaching for his phone. "Do you have to call her now?" I whispered through tears. "Can't this just be ours for a moment?" He looked at me like I'd asked him to cut off his own arm. "She'll want to know. She cares about you too." The doctor confirmed what my body already knew. No heartbeat. No baby. Just emptiness where hope used to live. And then Patricia arrived. I was still in the hospital gown, still bleeding, still processing that the life inside me was gone. She walked into that room like she was visiting someone with a head cold, not someone who'd just lost their first child. "Well, maybe it's for the best," she said, settling into the visitor's chair with her purse clutched primly in her lap. "You two aren't financially ready anyway." My soul left my body. She complained about the parking situation, about how long everything was taking. She asked the nurses intrusive questions right in front of me. Was it something she did? I told Eric she works too much. But the worst was yet to come. "This wouldn't have happened if Eric had chosen better," she said, her voice cold as winter. "Some women are just built for this. Others." She let the words hang in the antiseptic air like poison. When I started really crying, the kind of sobs that come from your very core, she actually rolled her eyes. "These things happen. Some women just aren't meant to carry to term." I was holding the tiny baby shoes I'd bought just 2 weeks earlier. White canvas sneakers with little yellow ducks embroidered on the sides. I'd imagined tiny feet filling them, first steps across our living room. Now I clutched them like they were all I had left of the future I'd lost. Patricia looked at those shoes, looked at me holding them to my chest like a lifeline. Her lips curled into a smile so small it almost didn't exist. But it was there. The satisfaction. The cruelty. Well, good riddance to all that expense and sleepless nights. I clutched the baby shoes tighter to my chest, my voice barely a whisper. That was my child. My baby. Not trash. The room went dead quiet. Even the machine seemed to pause. Those 2 words, good riddance, echoed in my mind like a broken record. Eric's face went white, but he didn't say anything. Not one word. Something died inside me that had nothing to do with the miscarriage. The death of trust. The death of hope that this woman would ever see me as human. But what grew in its place would destroy her completely. Over the next weeks, Patricia made it her mission to ensure I couldn't grieve in peace. She sent Eric articles with little notes. Moving on quickly after pregnancy loss. Thought this might help with the situation. Why dwelling on miscarriage is unhealthy. Some women just bounce back faster. The situation. That's what my dead baby had become. When I took time off work, she called it dramatic. When I couldn't face cleaning out the spare room we'd started turning into a nursery, she told Eric I was wallowing. She'd make little jokes about my fragility. "Oh, we have to be careful around Nichole now," she'd tell Eric with theatrical sighs. "She's very sensitive." But I was done being her victim. I started keeping a detailed journal, writing down every cruel comment, every comparison to the perfect Sarah who haunted our marriage like a ghost. I told myself it was therapy. Really, I was gathering evidence. March 15th. Patricia told Eric I should focus on being grateful for what I have, instead of dwelling on what went wrong. Direct quote while I was sitting right there. Added, "Sarah always bounced back quickly from disappointments." March 28th. "Maybe this is God's way of telling you something, Nichole. Sarah would have been such a natural mother." Something else was growing inside me during those long nights. Not new life, something colder. Something harder. Something that whispered that maybe it was time Patricia learned what real pain felt like. I started responding to her cruelty with something that unsettled her more than any argument could. Silence. When she'd make her snide comments, I'd just look at her. No defending myself. No tears. No reaction. Just a steady, knowing look that made her squirm. It drove her crazy. The silence made her push harder, say worse things, reveal more of who she really was. Because cruel people need to see the pain they're causing or they escalate. That's exactly what I was counting on. But first, I needed confirmation of what I already knew. I called Patricia's sister Margaret. We'd only met a few times, but she'd always seemed kind. "Margaret," I said carefully, "has Patricia ever said anything to you about me? About Eric and me?" The silence stretched forever. "Oh, honey," she finally said, discomfort clear in her voice. "She talks about you a lot. Compares you to Sarah, Eric's ex, says Eric settled. Says you're not, well, not what she would have chosen for him." My heart sank even as my resolve strengthened. "Would you be willing to tell Eric what you just told me? If I asked you to?" "If it would help, yes." I never liked hearing her talk about you that way. Perfect. Now I had an ally. Patricia's own family member willing to expose her pattern of cruelty. 3 months after the miscarriage, I was ready to spring my trap. I invited both Eric and Patricia over for dinner. A peace offering, I told them. Patricia couldn't hide her smug satisfaction. She thought she'd won. She had no idea what was coming. After dinner, I placed my journal on the coffee table between us. Eric, I said quietly, there's something I need you to read. Every page is Patricia's words. If you still think I'm exaggerating her treatment of me, read them yourself. Eric picked up the journal with trembling hands, Patricia's face going pale. That's private, Patricia protested. Actually, it's not, I said calmly. Every word came out of your mouth. In front of witnesses. Including me. As Eric read, his face grew harder with each page. 3 months of documented cruelty, laid out chronologically. But I wasn't done. I looked directly at Patricia. I keep reading these entries and sometimes I wonder, maybe I imagined some of it? Maybe in my grief I made it sound worse than it was? Like what you said in the hospital. Maybe I imagined that too. Patricia's eyes lit up with triumph. She couldn't resist the opportunity to remind me of my lowest moment. Well, you didn't imagine it, she said with that same cruel smile. You were pathetic, clutching those ridiculous baby shoes. I meant every word I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Eric looked up from the journal, his face a mask of disgust and betrayal. I can't believe what I just read, he said, voice barely controlled. 3 months of you torturing my wife. And now you just admitted it was all intentional. I reached for my phone. Margaret, could you come over? Eric needs to hear what you told me. Patricia's face went white. You called my sister? 20 minutes later, Margaret arrived. When she saw Patricia, her face filled with embarrassment. Eric, Margaret said quietly, your mother has been very critical of Nichole to the whole family. For months. Comparing her to Sarah, saying you settled, saying she wasn't good enough for you. Eric's hands started shaking. Even before the miscarriage? Especially before the miscarriage. After. Patricia, what you said about it being for the best. I can't support that. It was cruel. Tell her about good riddance. Patricia's carefully constructed mask finally slipped completely. You want the truth? She snapped, standing up with shaking hands. Fine. Here's the truth. What came next was uglier than I'd ever imagined. Patricia began pacing, her voice rising. I lost 4 babies before Eric was born. 4 babies. Nobody cared. Nobody sent me articles or gave me time off work or let me cry for weeks. I had to just get over it and try again. She collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing. I thought I was making you stronger, she continued, voice breaking. I thought caring less would hurt less. I thought if I could toughen you up, you wouldn't break like I did. I felt a flash of understanding. She thought cruelty would armor me. Instead, it scarred me the way she'd been scarred. But here's what made it unforgivable. She had a choice. She could have broken the cycle. She could have given me the compassion she never received. Instead, she chose to pass on her pain. Eric's face went through shock, horror, understanding, and then disgust. I could see him remembering his childhood, how she'd always framed tough love as care. Now he saw it for what it had always been. Cruelty masquerading as protection. So you decided to torture my wife, he said slowly, standing up. Because you were tortured? I was trying to help. You made the worst moment of our lives about you and your pain, he interrupted, voice getting stronger. You took our grief and made it your opportunity to relive your own trauma. Patricia reached for him, but he stepped back. You want to know what the worst part is? I defended you. Every single time she tried to tell me how cruel you were being, I defended you. I told her you cared. He looked at me then and I saw something I'd never seen before. My husband choosing me over his mother. But you meant every word, didn't you? You wanted her to hurt. You wanted her to suffer because you suffered. Patricia was falling apart completely now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to help. But it was too late. Eric's voice was quiet but final. You need to leave. Now. Eric, please. Give me your key. Patricia fumbled in her purse with trembling hands, placing the apartment key on the coffee table like it burned her fingers. Don't come back unless we invite you. Don't call unless it's an emergency. And don't ever speak about my wife or our loss that way again. Margaret left quietly, squeezing my shoulder as she passed. Patricia was completely alone now, exposed by her own words, her own family, her own inability to resist confirming her cruelty. The silence after Patricia left was deafening. Eric and I sat on the couch, both processing what had just happened. The woman who had controlled every aspect of our relationship for 3 years was gone. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm so fucking sorry." And then he broke down. Really broke down. Not just for our lost baby, but for all the times he'd failed to protect me. All the times he'd chosen his mother's comfort over my pain. "I didn't know," he sobbed. "I swear to God, I didn't know she was capable of that kind of cruelty." The healing took time. We started couples therapy immediately. Our therapist asked Eric a question that shattered something inside him. "When did you first notice you were putting your mother's needs before Nichole's?" The silence stretched for a full minute. Then came the tears, years of suppressed recognition that his mother had trained him to seek her approval while convincing him every decision was his own. Eric started individual therapy too, working to understand the manipulation that had shaped his entire life. I continued my own therapy, processing not just the miscarriage, but the betrayal that had made it infinitely worse. We didn't just go through the motions of healing. We rebuilt our marriage from the ground up. We learned to recognize manipulation tactics. We practiced putting our relationship first. We created new boundaries and stuck to them even when it felt uncomfortable. It wasn't easy. Some days Eric would instinctively reach for his phone to call his mother, then stop himself. Some nights I'd wake up in a cold sweat, reliving Patricia's cruel words. But slowly, carefully we began to trust each other again. 3 months later, Patricia tried to reconcile. She sent a long letter explaining her history of pregnancy losses, her depression, her regret. She asked for forgiveness and a chance to start over. Eric read it to me over breakfast, then looked up. "What do you think?" Old Eric would have already been making excuses for her. New Eric asked his wife what she thought. "I think," I said carefully, "that pain is not an excuse for cruelty. And I think some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt." He nodded and threw the letter away. A year later we got pregnant again. This time was different. We waited until 20 weeks to tell anyone. We protected our joy like the precious thing it was. Every ultrasound appointment, I'd squeeze Eric's hand so tight my knuckles went white, terrified of hearing silence instead of a heartbeat. But when that strong, steady thump-thump-thump filled the room, I'd cry tears of relief and hope. We savored every kick, every hiccup, every moment our daughter moved inside me. We talked to her, sang to her, promised her a world where cruelty disguised as love would never touch her. Patricia never met her granddaughter. Not because we're cruel people, but because choices have consequences. She chose to make my darkest moment about her pain. She chose to mock my grief. She chose cruelty over compassion. And we chose to protect our family from that poison. Our daughter is 2 now, happy and healthy and surrounded by people who celebrate her existence. She has grandparents who love her. My parents who flew across the country when she was born and cried tears of joy. She doesn't have Patricia, and that's exactly as it should be. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty about keeping Patricia from her granddaughter. If I think I'm being too harsh. Here's what I tell them. When someone shows you who they are in your darkest moment, believe them. When someone uses your pain as an opportunity to inflict more pain, protect yourself and your children. Patricia lost her son not because of my revenge but because of her own choices. I didn't have to destroy her. She destroyed herself the moment she chose cruelty over compassion. The real revenge isn't that she lost access to her granddaughter. The real revenge is that I stopped letting her live rent-free in my head. I stopped crying for what I lost and started smiling at what I survived. And sometimes, late at night when I'm watching my daughter sleep, I think about Patricia. Alone in her apartment, estranged from her son, missing out on bedtime stories and first words and birthday parties. That's not my revenge. That's just justice. Final shot. Nichole holding the same baby shoes from the hospital. Those white canvas sneakers with yellow ducks. She runs her fingers over the soft fabric one last time, then places them gently in a memory box alongside a hospital bracelet and an ultrasound photo. The baby shoes that once represented my deepest pain now rest peacefully in this box. I touch them sometimes, remembering not just the loss but the strength I found in surviving it. Because the best revenge against someone who tried to break you isn't becoming like them. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Strong. Whole. Free. Patricia thought my miscarriage was the end of me. But it was the end of her power over me. And that's the kind of ending you don't come back from. Justice, it turns out, is the most satisfying revenge of all. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have loved you, drop a heart in the comments below. And if this story gave you hope that justice does exist, hit that subscribe button, because everyone deserves to know their worth.